I want you to picture something seemingly totally mundane.
Okay.
It is 1963. The location is the Cappadocia region of Turkey. And the protagonist of our story isn't, an archaeologist or an adventurer.
Right. He's just a guy.
Exactly. An anonymous man who decides it is finally time to renovate his house.
Which usually involves paint swatches or fixing a leaky roof.
Right. But in this case, he is down in his basement, and he is annoyed. He is annoyed because his actual livelihood, keep disappearing.
Oh, well.
And I don't mean they are getting stolen. I mean they are literally vanishing into the architecture of his home.
Wait, how does a chicken vanish into a house?
Well, they wander into the small, dark crevice in the basement wall, and they never come back out.
It honestly sounds like the setup for a fairy tale. The mysteriously disappearing livestock.
It really does. So this guy, probably frustrated and just looking for his eggs, decides to take a sledgehammer to the wall.
Makes sense.
He thinks maybe there is a fox den back there, or maybe a small cave. He swings the hammer, the wall crumbles, and he doesn't find a fox den.
No.
He finds a tunnel, a cool, dark, hand-carved tunnel plunging straight down into the earth.
And just to clarify the scale here, he didn't just find an old root cellar.
No, not at all. By knocking down that wall, this man accidentally rediscovered the entrance to Derinkuyu.
Incredible.
He found a massive, ancient, underground metropolis capable of holding 20,000 people, buried over 200 feet beneath the surface.
It really is one of the most staggering archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. I mean, you go from a simple home renovation to realizing you are sitting on top of an 18-level subterranean city.
It's mind-blowing, and that is exactly where we are starting today. We're looking down, but we're doing something a little different with this deep dive. We have two very different stacks of research on the desk today.
We do. On one side, we have the hard science. We have the proven archaeological reality of Derinkuyu, the engineering, the acoustics, the survival mechanics of an actual city built inside the rock.
And on the other side, we have the what-ifs.
The weird stuff.
Yeah. We have a stack of archives from North America, miners' journals, letters to pulp magazines in the 1940s, and indigenous oral traditions that describe underground worlds right here in the U.S.
The contrast is really what makes this interesting, because in Turkey, the underground city is a proven fact. You can go walk in it right now.
Right.
But in the Americas, it's this fascinating mix of folklore, unverified accounts, and unexplained anomalies. But, the core question remains exactly the same.
Why does humanity look downward for safety?
Exactly. Why is the underground always the ultimate refuge or the ultimate origin?
So let's grab our flashlights and start with the reality. Let's go back to that basement in Turkey. Once the authorities got involved and the archaeologists pushed past the chickens and started mapping this place, what exactly did they find?
They found an engineering marvel that, frankly, shouldn't exist given the time period it was built. Derinkuyu, which translates to deep, well, by the way, is essentially an 18-story high-rise, but inverted.
Going straight down.
It goes down about 85 meters. That is roughly 280 feet deep.
Just to help you visualize that at home, that is like burying a 25-story skyscraper underground.
Essentially, yes. And it wasn't just a bunker for a few elite families. It wasn't a panic room. The capacity estimates are remarkably consistent, around 20,000 people.
20,000?
Yes. But that number includes their livestock, their massive food stores, their wine presses, their schools, everything.
That's the population of a decent-sized college town, all packed into a rock formation without electricity, without GPS, without modern steel fan ventilation.
And that is the key right there, the layout. It wasn't a grid. It wasn't Manhattan. You have to imagine it more like an organic structure.
Like a hive.
Exactly. One of the early surveyors actually compared it to a massive ant colony. It wasn't master planned in a single year. It expanded over centuries, maybe even millennia.
So as the population grew, they just dug further.
Right. As the surface became more dangerous, they just kept digging deeper and creating these incredibly complex, interlocking networks of tunnels and rooms.
Okay, let's unpack the survival aspect, because my first thought is absolute panic. You put 20,000 people in a sealed cave, you are going to run out of air in about an hour.
It's the most pressing problem.
How are they not suffocating down there?
That is the very first thing modern engineers look at when they study this place. The ventilation system in Derinkuyu is an absolute masterclass in fluid dynamics.
Really?
Yes. They dug over 15,000 individual ventilation shafts.
Wait, 15,000?
15,000.
Yeah.
And they aren't all the same size. You have these small capillary-like shafts, maybe 10 centimeters wide. that feed directly into individual family rooms. But then you have the massive lungs of the city. These are primary shafts that go down 55 meters or more, straight down.
So they are using the stack effect, the hot air rising.
Precisely. It is passive geothermal cooling. The air deep underground is a constant cool temperature. The air on the surface fluctuates.
Right, it gets hot in the sun.
And that temperature differential creates a natural pressure vacuum. Hot, stale air from 20,000 breathing humans and animals is naturally pulled up and out, while fresh, cool surface air is drawn down into the depths.
So they didn't need fans at all, they just used physics.
Physics and incredibly precise digging.
That is incredibly sophisticated. But the main shaft served another purpose too, right?
It did. The primary shaft was also the main well, hence the name Deep Well. It tapped into the water table far below the lowest level of the city.
Which is vital if you're hiding.
Exactly. But here's the strategic genius of it. The residents controlled access to the water from the bottom up.
What does that mean in a practical sense, say, in a siege scenario?
Well, imagine you are an invading army on the surface. You know there are people down there. You find one of these massive ventilation shafts. Your first instinct, tactically speaking, might be to poison the well.
Right, classic ancient siege tactic. Dump something toxic down the hole, flush them out, or kill them.
But you can't, because the people at the bottom have capped the access from below.
Oh, wow.
They can cut off the flow to the upper levels while keeping the deep reservoir completely secure for themselves. It effectively neutralizes the threat of water poisoning from above.
That brings us perfectly to the defense aspect. Because if I am an invader and I can't smoke them out and I can't poison them, my only option is coming down the stairs.
Which is exactly what the builders wanted you to do.
How do you stop an entire army when you are cornered in a hole in the ground?
You turn the architecture itself into a weapon. The corridors connecting the levels in Derinkuyu are intentionally narrow and incredibly low.
Like how low?
You have to crouch significantly to walk through them. In some places, you're almost on hands and knees. This forces an invading army to move single file and completely hunched over.
So the numbers advantage completely vanishes.
Exactly. It creates a terrifying bottleneck for the attacker. One single defender with a spear can hold off 100 soldiers, because those soldiers can only come one at a time, bent over, unable to swing a sword or use their shields effectively.
That is brutal.
And then there are the doors.
The Rolling Stones. I saw pictures of these in the research.
Yes. These are massive, millstone-shaped wheels carved from a much harder rock than the surrounding walls.
How big are we talking?
They are about 1.5 meters in diameter, so about 5 feet tall, and they weigh up to 500 kilograms. That's half a ton.
And you can't just kick a half-ton door open.
No, especially not when you're crouching. But the real trick is that they were engineered with a specific asymmetry. They could only be opened or closed from the inside.
How does that work?
The groove they roll in is angled. From the outside, the rock sits flush against the frame. There's no lip, no handle, no leverage point whatsoever. Once that stone is rolled across the corridor, it is a solid, immovable wall to anyone on the outside.
But didn't they have a hole right in the middle?
They did, a small central hole. Now, modern people look at that and think, oh, a peephole, to see who's knocking.
Great, like an ancient ring camera.
Exactly. But in the context of ancient, brutal warfare, that is a murder hole.
Oh.
It allowed the defenders to safely thrust a spear straight through the stone into the faces of the attackers trying to push it, or to fire arrows, all while remaining completely protected behind half a ton of solid rock.
It is psychological warfare, too, if you think about it. Imagine you are a Roman or Arab soldier. You're forced to crawl into the pitch dark, you have no idea what the layout is, and suddenly you hit an immovable object while someone stabs at you through a tiny hole in the dark.
It would be absolutely terrifying. And that fear, that hesitation, was a core part of the defense.
I want to pivot and talk about the logistics of daily life down there, though, because 20,000 people creates a lot of, let's politely call it, biological output.
Yes, it does.
And they had animals down there. If you have a herd of cows on the 8th level down, that smell is never, ever going away.
That is exactly why they didn't put cows on the 8th level.
Yeah.
The city had incredibly strict zoning laws, essentially. We see this clearly in the archaeological floor plans.
How is it organized?
The top levels, the ones closest to the surface, were almost exclusively used for livestock. Barns, stables, fodder storage.
Why keep them at the top? Wouldn't you want your food source protected deeper down?
Two very practical reasons. First, as you mentioned, the smell and the methane. You want the animal waste as close to the exhaust output shaft as possible so it doesn't drift down into the human living quarters and ruin the air quality.
That makes perfect sense.
Second, consider the physical logistics of moving animals. Have you ever tried to get a goat or a cow to walk down 18 flights of narrow, pitch-black spiral stairs?
I have not, but I assume it's a nightmare.
It's nearly impossible. Animals panic in confined, dark spaces. So, for pure efficiency, the animals stayed near the exit. The humans lived below them.
Okay, so the top level is the barn. What is in the middle?
The middle levels were the civic center. That is where you find the sprawling family dormitories, the communal kitchens, the schools.
They had schools?
Yes, rooms laid out clearly for instruction. They even found a massive room with a beautiful barrel-vaulted ceiling that is undeniably a church.
Deep underground.
Deep underground. It has a cruciform, a cross-shaped floor plan. This tells us something vital. It tells us that even while hiding in terror from armies above, they weren't just surviving. They were actively maintaining their culture. They were holding Sunday services.
They were living.
Exactly.
And the bottom levels, the
Yeah.
deep freeze.
The absolute deepest levels were reserved for long-term storage and, grimly, temporary burial.
Because of the temperature.
Right. The ambient temperature is cool and incredibly constant down there, so it acts like a natural refrigerator. They stored massive vats of wine, huge caches of potatoes and grain.
And the burials.
Well, if someone died of old age or illness during a 6-month siege, you obviously couldn't go up to the surface to bury them in a cemetery. The enemy's up there.
Oh, right.
So they had designated sealed areas in the lowest depths to store the bodies until the war was over and it was safe to leave.
It is amazing that they could carve all this out in the first place. I mean, if I try to dig a hole in my backyard to plant a tree, I hit a granite rock and I'm done for the day.
And that brings us to the geological luck of Cappadocia. The entire region is covered in a thick, massive layer of what geologists call tuff.
Tuff?
Yes. It is a very specific type of soft rock, made entirely of compressed volcanic ash from the massive eruptions of Mount Hassan millions of years ago.
So it's not like digging through granite.
Not at all. When tuff is underground and retains its natural moisture, it is incredibly soft. I mean, you could almost carve it with a sturdy spoon if you worked at it long enough. Ancient bronze or iron tools would slice right through it.
But wait, if it's that soft, wouldn't the ceiling just immediately collapse on you?
That is the absolute magic of the material. Once tuff is exposed to air, once you carve out that tunnel and the oxygen hits it, it interacts chemically and hardens.
No way.
Yes. It creates a natural oxidation crust on the exposed surface that basically turns it into a kind of concrete.
So it is easy to dig, but the very moment you are done digging, it reinforces itself.
Precisely. Nature literally provided the perfect, pre-mixed bunker material. Without that incredibly specific volcanic geology, Derinkuyu simply would not and could not exist.
That is fascinating. Now, we usually talk about archaeology as a purely visual thing, right? We look at ruins, we look at floor plans.
Right, it's very site-based.
But there was a study presented recently that I found absolutely mind-bending. It was by a researcher named Cezanne Nas, presented at the Acoustical Society of America in May 2025.
Yes, this is a fantastic piece of new research.
She didn't look at the city, she listened to it.
Nas argued that we are missing a massive part of the human experience of these spaces by only looking at silent 2D maps. So she built a highly detailed 3D acoustic model of the tunnels to simulate exactly how sound waves would propagate through that specific volcanic rock.
Because it wasn't a silent, empty tomb, it was a bustling city.
Exactly. Imagine 20,000 people, kids playing in the halls, blacksmiths hammering metal, animals lowing, hundreds of people cooking dinner. It was a dense, chaotic, urban soundscape.
And what did her model find?
Nas found that the ventilation shafts, those 15,000 holes we talked about, actually acted like a primitive citywide intercom system.
The shafts carried the sound.
Perfectly. Because they cut vertically straight through the floor, sound waves could travel up and down with very little acoustic loss.
So you could talk to the floor above you.
Easily. A mother on level 5 could theoretically hear her baby crying clearly on level 3, or, much more importantly from a defense perspective, a sentry keeping watch on level 1 could yell a warning that would propagate down the main shafts to the lowest levels almost instantly.
So the building was essentially wired for sound.
It was. And the rock itself played a massive role in this. Tuff is very porous. It is full of tiny, microscopic air bubbles trapped from the volcanic eruption.
Does that muffle the sound?
It creates a high absorption coefficient for very specific frequencies. Nas discovered what she actually calls acoustic zoning.
Meaning the architecture controlled the noise levels.
Yes. For example, the communal kitchens. These would have been incredibly loud spaces with all the chopping, grinding, and fires. The builders gave the kitchens much lower ceilings.
To absorb the clatter.
Exactly. The low, porous ceiling absorbed the chaotic, high-frequency noise, keeping it contained so it didn't echo through the sleeping quarters.
But then you have the church.
Right. The church they carved with incredibly high, sweeping barrel vaults. Those hard, curved surfaces reflected sound perfectly, creating that booming, resonant, deeply spiritual echo that you want in a place of worship.
That is wild. It implies they understood architectural acoustics intuitively, centuries before it was a formal science.
It goes even deeper than that, actually. Nas suggests that because lighting was so severely limited, oil lamps are expensive and fire eats up your precious oxygen, the residents likely learned to navigate primarily by sound.
Like bats, like human echolocation?
In a way, yes. If you live your entire life in a dim tunnel, you learn the specific, subtle echo of the kitchen hallway versus the stable hallway. You hear the distinct change in the floor texture under your sandals.
That makes total sense. In a low-light environment, your ears have to become your eyes.
The city was designed to be heard every bit as much as it was designed to be seen.
Okay, so we have the what and we have the how, but the who is still a bit fuzzy, isn't it?
It's the subject of intense, ongoing debate in the archaeological community.
What is the mainstream view?
The mainstream historical consensus points to a group called the Phrygians as the most likely original builders.
Who were they?
They were an Iron Age people, thriving around the 8th or 7th century BC in that area. They were historically renowned as master architects and rock cutters. The specific tool marks found in the oldest sections and the general architectural style fit their profile perfectly.
But there are older artifacts found down there, right?
There are Hittite artifacts, which would push the timeline way back into the Bronze Age. Around 1500 BC have been found in the upper levels.
So did the Hittites build it?
That is the tricky part. Does finding a Bronze Age pot mean the Hittites carved the city? Or did they just use a naturally occurring cave for storage, which the Phrygians later came along and massively expanded into a city?
Ah, I see.
It's notoriously hard to say because you cannot carbon date a rock cut. The volcanic rock itself is millions of years old. The act of cutting it leaves no organic material to test.
Right, you can only date what people left behind in the room, not the room itself.
Exactly.
We do know for a fact that the Christians used it much later, though.
Definitely. The Byzantine era, roughly the 8th to the 12th century AD, is when the city really hit its absolute peak capacity and complexity.
Who were they hiding from?
They were Greek-speaking Christians hiding from massive Roman persecutions originally, and later from Arab Muslim raiders during the Arab-Byzantine Wars.
So they were the ones who really built out the defenses.
Yes. They added the chapels, the Greek inscriptions on the walls, and they likely engineered those complex rolling defensive doors. They took a prehistoric refuge and turned it into a medieval fortress.
And we actually have a written record of this place existing way back then, right? It's not just distinct scratch marks on a wall that we're guessing at.
We do. We have Xenophon.
The Greek historian.
Yes, Xenophon was a Greek soldier and historian. In his famous work, the Anabasis, which was written around 370 BC, he describes marching his army through Anatolia.
And what does he say?
He explicitly writes about encountering these underground homes where the entrances were like the mouths of waters, but they widened out dramatically below.
Just like Derinkuyu.
Precisely. He even mentions the people living deep down there with their goats, sheep, and poultry, using long ladders to get in and out.
Which confirms unequivocally that people were living a complex underground lifestyle there at least 2,400 years ago.
Exactly. It's an absolute smoking gun in the historical record.
But of course, when you have a giant, mysterious underground city, you are inevitably going to attract alternative theories.
Always.
And as part of this deep dive, we have to impartially touch on the ideas from the sources that go, let's say, a little off the beaten academic path.
We do. Graham Hancock, for instance, has looked extensively at Cappadocia.
Right. He's famous for his theories on lost ancient civilizations.
Yes. He suggests that the origins of Derinkuyu might be much, much older than the Iron Age, potentially going all the way back to the end of the last ice age.
The younger Dryas period.
Right, roughly 12,000 years ago.
What is his core argument? Why would a hunter-gatherer society build a massive rock bunker in the Ice Age?
His theory is basically that the sky was falling. The younger Dryas period is characterized by sudden, violent climate shifts, which some theorize might have been caused by catastrophic comet impacts or massive solar instability.
So, an apocalypse scenario.
Yes. Hancock argues that if the surface of the Earth is literally being bombarded by cosmic debris, or if the climate swings to freezing violently overnight, the only safe place for humanity is down.
So he sees it not as a fort, but as an ark.
Exactly. An arc, not for a flood, but for a cosmic winter. He links the oldest, crudest tool marks deep in the tunnels to prehistoric capabilities.
And then there is Eric von Daniken.
Right. The author of Chariots of the Gods. He visited the site himself in 1982.
And his take was a bit different.
Very different. He looked at the extreme depth of the city and the sheer volume of the ventilation shafts and said, this isn't for hiding from Roman soldiers on horseback. This is an air raid shelter.
An air raid shelter in antiquity.
Yes. He implied that the only logical reason to go that unbelievably deep into solid rock is to avoid aerial bombardment.
And since the Romans and the Phrygians definitely didn't have heavy bombers,
Extraterrestrials. Or at least humanity seeking protection from a devastating war fought in the skies by advanced airborne beings.
it's a fascinating lens to view the site through, even if the mainstream archaeological evidence for the Phrygians is the accepted consensus. It shows how the sheer scale of the place defies normal explanation.
It truly does. It forces the imagination to work overtime.
So that is Turkey, verified, mapped, acoustic modeled, historical reality, a functional city for 20,000 people that was just casually lost for centuries.
So a chicken found it.
Right. Now, I want to pivot sharply, because while Turkey has the physical proof, North America has the stories.
And the tone of our sources changes here completely. We are leaving the realm of carbon dating and academic papers, and we are entering the wild realm of folklore, whispers, and what I like to call the American underground.
We really need to set the historical scene for this. The era is crucial. It's the mid-20th century. World War II is over, but the Cold War is rapidly heating up.
Context is absolutely everything here. In 1947, the entire psychology of the world had fundamentally changed. The atomic bomb had dropped.
Right. The surface of the Earth no longer felt inherently safe.
Exactly. There was a very real, palpable anxiety that all of surface humanity could be wiped out in a sudden flash of nuclear light. The sky was no longer just the sky. It was where the missiles would come from.
And this cultural anxiety is exactly when the Shaver mystery takes over the American pulp magazines.
Right. For those who don't know, Richard Shaver was a man who wrote these incredibly detailed, somewhat manic letters to Amazing Stories magazine, claiming he had personally visited a vast underground civilization.
He talked about Dryas, right? Detrimental robot.
Yes, Dryas, ancient alien technology, subterranean mind control rays. It was wild stuff.
And people just bought it. They believed him.
They absolutely devoured it. The editor of the magazine, Ray Palmer, claimed he received thousands of letters from completely regular Americans, farmers, mechanics, teachers, claiming that they, too, had seen these mysterious tunnels and heard sounds from deep in the earth.
It became a coping mechanism.
Exactly. It was a cultural way to process that profound existential fear of the atom bomb. If the surface is doomed to burn, maybe the real permanent world is safely downstairs.
Let's look at some of these specific American accounts from the sources because they are wildly, vividly detailed. The Death Valley story is an absolute classic of the genre.
This one is straight out of an Indiana Jones adventure novel. It involves two men, Berkeley, or rather, Thomason and White, depending on the specific retelling you read in the archives.
Right. Thomason and White, what did they claim?
They claim that in the early 1930s, they found a hidden tunnel entrance near Wingate Pass in Death Valley, California. They followed it down and stumbled into a colossal cavern that went on for 20 miles beneath the desert floor.
20 miles. And they didn't just find empty rocks and stalagmites.
No. They claimed they found a dead ancient city. And the details are so specific. They described finding perfectly preserved mummies.
But not Egyptian-style mummies.
Right. Listen to this description from the source. They weren't wrapped in fine linen. They were wearing thick leather aprons like ancient blacksmiths or craftsmen.
And they found gold.
Everywhere. They described walking into a massive council chamber with a highly polished stone table, and at the head of it was a solid gold statue.
And the size of the statue.
They claimed it was 89 feet tall.
89 feet. That is an 8-story building made entirely of solid gold.
The scale is completely absurd.
Wow.
This sounds like pure fantasy. But then hidden right in the middle of this wild treasure tale is a mechanical detail that absolutely stops me in my tracks every time I read it.
The doors.
The doors. They describe the entrances to the city being guarded by what they called balanced rock doors.
What does that mean?
They described massive, multi-ton boulders that looked completely immovable to the naked eye. But they were engineered and counterweighted so perfectly on hidden pivot points that a man could swing them open with his pinky finger.
That sounds exactly like the rolling millstone doors of Derinkuyu we just talked about.
It does. It is a highly specific, advanced engineering mechanism using hidden pivot points and perfect balance to effortlessly move massive weight.
Now, did two prospectors named Thomason and White happen to read an obscure archaeological report about Turkish rock doors in 1930?
Highly unlikely.
Is it just a massive coincidence of imagination?
Maybe, but it is a striking parallel across continents.
Did they bring any of this gold back to prove it?
They claim to have taken some small treasure, but as always happens in these legendary tales, when they tried to lead a formal expedition back to the site, a sudden cloudburst and massive flash flood had completely altered the canyon landscape.
How convenient. The entrance was gone.
Washed away forever. The classic lost mine trope.
Right. But let's move further up the coast to California. Mount Shasta and Mount Lassen. The Ralph B. Fields account. This one feels less like a Western treasure hunt and much more like a direct sci-fi encounter.
This is a deeply disturbing story from our archives. Fields wrote that he was just out looking for guano bat droppings to sell as agricultural fertilizer.
A very glamorous pursuit.
Very. He finds a cave entrance near Mount Lassen. He goes deep inside. Miles deep, he claims. And he doesn't find mummies in leather aprons.
No, he finds people.
Living people. He described encountering 3 men. He specifically noted they wore strange, unfamiliar shoes and had no hats, which was odd for the time period.
But it was the machine they were using that he focused on in his writing.
Yes. He described a sled-like device with a copper bottom hovering over the ground.
Copper.
Yes. And he said it had a complex dial on the dashboard, was powered by some form of gravity manipulation, and required a carbon key to operate.
That is so weirdly specific. A carbon key.
And when it moved, he said it emitted a bright green light. He was very clear that the light was being created by horseshoe magnets spinning rapidly inside the machine.
That is such a technically bizarre detail for a made-up story. Horseshoe magnets creating green light.
It sounds exactly like a layman from the 1940s trying to describe advanced technology they don't possess the vocabulary to understand.
And then there were the Horlocks.
Right, the monsters.
Who were they?
Fields claimed he had seen 5 primitive, hairy, highly aggressive figures earlier in the upper levels of the cave. He called them Horlocks.
And what happened to them?
The advanced men, the ones with the hovering copper sled, basically vaporized these Horlocks with some sort of handheld tube weapon to protect Fields.
So you have a distinct subterranean hierarchy here. The highly civilized ancients with their tech, and the savage, degenerate race living closer to the surface.
Which heavily mirrors H.G. Wells's classic novel, The Time Machine, with the beautiful Eloi and the monstrous Morlocks.
True. But here is the real kicker of the Fields story. The warning.
Yes. The advanced men didn't invite him to tea. They told Fields to leave immediately and never ever come back.
Why?
They told him that humanity on the surface simply wasn't ready for their technology or their society. They explicitly said we would only use their power to destroy ourselves in war.
Which fits perfectly into that post-atomic era anxiety we talked about, the idea that we are simply too violent to be trusted with the good tech.
Exactly. The underground in this story becomes a place of moral judgment. They are safely down there watching us, and we are fundamentally found wanting.
Now, it is very easy to dismiss all of this as just 1940s pulp tabloids capitalizing on Cold War fears.
Oh, absolutely.
But the truly weird thing is, when you dig into the anthropology sources, these exact stories map onto indigenous North American oral traditions that are hundreds, if not thousands of years older than any pulp magazine.
This is the part of the deep dive where the hair really stands up on the back of my neck. Because the Hopi, the Apache, the Navajo, they definitely weren't reading amazing stories in 1947.
Right.
But they share the exact same geography of belief, the same structural narrative.
Let's talk about the Hopi, because their entire cosmology, their whole origin story, is built on this premise.
It is. The Hopi traditionally believe that they literally emerged from the earth. They call this sacred place the Sipipuni, the place of emergence.
And where do they say that is?
They locate it deep within the Grand Canyon. They believe their distant ancestors lived in the underworld, constantly migrating upward through different distinct worlds or layers of reality before finally surfacing into this current world.
And they have a very specific legend about a group called the Ant People.
The Anu Sinum, yes. This is a crucial legend when we compare it to Derinkuyu.
How does the story go?
The Hopi oral tradition states that during the First World, the surface of the Earth was completely destroyed by fire, which could be a cultural memory of extreme volcanism or solar flares. Then during the Second World, the surface was destroyed by ice, a clear parallel to a sudden ice age. In both of those global cataclysms, the ant people took the surviving surface humans underground to save them.
They protected them.
They sheltered them in massive, deep underground mounds. The legends say the ant people taught the humans how to safely store food for years and how to survive in the dark.
And the description of the ant people's lifestyle, these complex, multi-chambered, highly organized underground dwellings, is almost a perfect one-to-one description of the layout of Derinkuyu in Turkey.
It really is, and it directly connects back to Graham Hancock's theory about the younger Dryas refuge. The ant people might not be literal insect aliens.
What might they be?
They might be a surviving cultural memory of a highly advanced human group who built these subterranean bunkers. Think about it. If you are a surface-dwelling hunter-gatherer and you suddenly meet a civilization that lives exclusively in deep holes, stores massive amounts of grain, and works together in a perfect, silent hive mind to survive.
Ant people is a perfectly logical, descriptive name for them.
Exactly. It's metaphor mapping onto reality.
Do other tribes share this? Like the Apache have similar stories, right?
They do. The Apache have the legend of the Big Bend Canyon. The Navajos speak of sacred box caves that literally swallow thrown stones without making a sound, implying infinite depth.
And further east.
The Creek and Choctaw people have long-standing oral histories of their earliest ancestors emerging from massive cave systems near the Red River.
There is an account in our sources from an early French explorer too, right? A guy named Milfort.
Yes, Louis Milfort, writing way back in 1781. Centuries before the pulp magazines. Milford actually lived and traveled with the Creek Nation.
Where did he write?
He describes in his journals being taken to visit the sacred caves where the elders said their ancestors originally came from.
And what did he see?
He was stunned by the sheer size. He estimated, and this number should sound very familiar to you, that the cave system was easily large enough to hold 15,000 to 20,000 families.
There is that exact number again, 20,000.
Yeah.
It matches the population estimate for Derinkuyu almost perfectly.
It does. And it forces you to ask a very uncomfortable question. Is this just a universal coincidence of human storytelling? Just a trope? Or is it a shattered global memory?
A memory of what?
A memory of a specific epoch when the surface of the planet became completely uninhabitable and humanity, globally, had to retreat into the living rock just to survive the fire and the ice.
That completely changes the way you look at a cave. It is not just a hole in the ground anymore. It is a lifeboat.
A lifeboat that, according to some of these accounts, might still be occupied.
Well, that is the perfect segue to the darker stuff in our source pile. We have talked about benevolent ant people and wise, peaceful ancients hiding from the bomb.
Right.
But the sources also have a dedicated horror file.
Yeah.
And these aren't ancient legends. These are modern documented incident reports.
This is the section of the deep dive that legitimately makes me want to leave all the lights on in my house. Let's look at the Pennsylvania mine horror of 1944.
This one is incredibly gruesome. It involves an official mine inspector named Glenn E. Barger.
Yes. The story goes that a deep coal mine suffered a catastrophic collapse. A tragic, but unfortunately typical industrial accident.
But when they dug out the rubble...
When the rescue teams drilled in to reach the trapped men, they didn't hit a coal seam. They broke through into a massive, echoing void that absolutely was not on any of the mining company's geological maps.
There was an ancient, pre-existing tunnel.
Yes. And the trapped miners weren't dead from the rockfall.
No. The report claims the 15 miners were found dead, but the state of their bodies was totally wrong for a cave-in. They had been violently crushed, yes, but not by falling rocks.
They had massive claw marks on them.
And the rescuers actually encountered whatever did it.
Inspector Barger and another man pushed further into the unmapped void. They didn't see a monster clearly, which in a psychological way is actually scarier.
What did they experience?
They described hearing heavy, ominous, rhythmic breathing echoing in the absolute pitch darkness ahead of them.
Oh, man.
And then, Barger stated on the record that he physically felt hot breath wash over his face in the cold air.
That specific detail, feeling the heat of the breath in pitch blackness where nothing should be alive.
It implies extreme, terrifying proximity. Something massive was standing right in front of him, watching him, breathing on him in the dark.
What did they do?
They panicked. fled to the surface, immediately sealed the entire section of the mine with concrete, and the mining companies supposedly buried the official report to avoid a panic.
It taps perfectly into that deep, primal fear of the dark we all have. But then you have the story of Ernest in Toronto. This isn't out in the wilderness. This is 1979 in a major modern city.
Right. The Cabbagetown district of Toronto. Ernest is just a local working-class guy in his 50s. He loses his kitten, and it runs near a weird tunnel entrance tucked away between two apartment buildings.
Again, with the animals leading the way. First the chickens in Turkey, now a kitten in Canada.
We just blindly follow them down. So Ernest grabs a flashlight and crawls into the tunnel a few feet to grab the cat. And his flashlight beam hits a creature.
What did he tell the reporter it looked like?
He described it incredibly vividly. He said it was roughly 3 feet long, covered in slate gray fur, with glowing orange-red slanted eyes. He said it looked vaguely like a monkey, but fundamentally wrong.
And it spoke to him.
It hissed at him.
Wow.
In English. He claimed it explicitly said, "Go away. Go away."
That gives me absolute chills. It is so bluntly territorial.
It completely echoes the warning Ralph Fields got from the Advanced Men in Mount Lassen. Go away. You don't belong down here.
It aggressively suggests that the underground isn't just empty space waiting for us to explore it. It is already claimed territory.
Exactly.
There is also this really weird physical anomaly in the sources regarding thermal drills. This comes up in the Utah coal mines story from the 1950s.
Right. The miners in Wadis, Utah. They were tunneling 8,500 feet deep. That is over 1.5 miles deep inside a solid mountain.
And they hit another tunnel.
They hit a perfectly formed tunnel. But the terrifying detail was the coal lining the walls of that intersecting tunnel. It was heavily oxidized.
For the listener, explain the chemistry there. Why does oxidized coal matter?
Oxidation requires constant exposure to fresh air, weathering. If you find heavily oxidized coal 1.5 miles deep inside a solid sealed mountain,
It means that tunnel was open to the surface air for thousands of years before the modern miners ever got there.
it means someone else entirely dug it, used it extensively, and abandoned it eons ago.
And the drill marks on the walls.
This is where we cross firmly into Lost Tech territory. Multiple reports from these unmapped caves mention finding perfectly round tunnels with smooth, glassy walls. Not rough and chipped by pickaxes or dynamite, but perfectly smooth, like the rock itself was physically melted.
Like pushing a hot knife through butter.
The prevailing fringe theory is ancient thermal drills, technology that superheats and melts rock to bore through it rapidly, creating a smooth, ceramic-like liner as it goes to prevent collapse.
But we have that technology now, right?
And two, we have experimental, highly classified tech like that now, like the nuclear submarines developed at Los Alamos during the Cold War. But finding that exact glassy signature in tunnels that have been sealed for 10,000 years.
That implies a level of prehistoric technology that absolutely shouldn't exist in the accepted archaeological record.
Unless, of course, the Hopi ant people weren't just digging with sharp stones.
Exactly.
It opens up a terrifying world of possibilities.
So as we look at all these incredibly diverse data points from the sources, we have the scientifically proven multi-level network in Turkey. We have the consistent indigenous legends of the Americas. We have the localized modern horror stories of creatures.
Right.
Is there a unifying theory in the research that ties all of this together?
There is. It is widely known in the literature as the underground empire theory. It's the grand idea that these aren't just isolated pockets of weirdness.
They are connected.
The theory suggests a vast, globally interconnected subterranean network, a highway system deep in the crust.
Yes, the sources mention allegations that the massive Grand Canyon cave systems, the Sipapu Cavern we talked about, actually link for hundreds of miles to tunnel systems in other states entirely.
But the wildest, most audacious claim in the entire archive comes from a woman named Opal Kemp in 1947.
Ah, the Syracuse letter.
Yes, she wrote a desperate formal letter to local authorities asking for an expedition. She claimed there was a known ancient subterranean passage that started in the caves near Syracuse, New York.
Okay.
And she claimed this single tunnel went all the way under the Atlantic Ocean floor and safely came out in the British Isles.
A prehistoric transatlantic tunnel.
Geologically speaking, it is absolutely absurd. The crushing pressure, the tectonic plate shifts, the magma. It's scientifically impossible for a hollow tube to exist there.
But the fascinating thing isn't the geology. The fascinating thing is the psychology. The fact that an adult woman wholly believed it shows just how incredibly powerful this archetype is.
It does. The deep-seated hope that the world is secretly hollow and that everything is fundamentally connected if you just dig deep enough.
But before you at home totally write off connectivity as just crazy wishful thinking, let's actually go back to Turkey, to Derinkuyu, one last time.
Yes, we need to ground this.
Because physical connectivity between underground cities, there isn't a fringe theory. It is a mapped reality.
That is the ultimate reality check. Derinkuyu isn't alone. It is physically connected to an entirely different underground city called Kamakli.
And they aren't just next-door neighbors.
No, they are connected by a hand-carved tunnel that is roughly 9 kilometers long. That is about 5 miles.
5 miles of continuous hand-dug tunnel.
Deep underground. Just try to imagine the sheer mathematical and surveying skill required to dig a 5-mile tunnel through solid rock in total darkness and actually perfectly hit your target city at the other end.
So if they could flawlessly connect distinct cities 5 miles apart in 800 BC.
It suddenly makes the idea of larger regional networks, maybe not across the Atlantic Ocean, but certainly stretching across an entire state, seem much, much less crazy.
And we know there are more cities out there.
Oh, absolutely. We know for a fact there are at least 200 distinct underground cities in the Cappadocia region alone, and only 6 of them have been fully explored and mapped by archaeologists.
Only 6 out of 200.
We are literally just scratching the surface. In fact, just in 2013, builders found another one in Nevzahir province that might be even larger than Derinkuyu. We don't even know what's down there yet.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. Let's land this plane, or I guess park this thermal drill.
Right.
We have the verified acoustic modeled engineering of Derinkuyu on one hand. We have the unverifiable fantastical legends of the Americas on the other. What is the core thread that ties the human experience of the underground together?
Looking at all the sources, I really think the absolute core thread is preservation.
Preservation. Expand on that.
In every single story we've analyzed, whether it's a peer-reviewed historical fact or a wild pulp legend, the underground is always functioning as a dedicated space of preservation.
How so? Give me the breakdown.
In Turkey, it was intensely practical. They preserved their actual lives from armies. They preserved their wine, their grain, their livestock in the cold. But most importantly, they preserved their faith and culture.
Right, the cross-shaped church.
They willingly went down into the dark to keep their way of life alive when the surface world was burning with war.
And the American legends.
The legends do the exact same thing, just on a mythic scale. They are about preserving the wisdom of the old ones, preserving advanced technology from our violent hands, preserving humanity itself from the cosmic fire and ice.
So the underground is basically the ultimate backup hard drive for human civilization.
That is a perfect way to phrase it. It is the failsafe. It is exactly where we go when the surface system totally crashes.
It really challenges that inherent assumption we all have that progress always means building upward. We love our skyscrapers, our airplanes, our space rockets. We naturally think the future is always up.
But the deep history we've looked at today strongly suggests that long-term survival is always down. When the chips are truly down and the sky is falling, humanity doesn't look up at the stars for help. We look for a cave.
Man, that makes me look at the ground completely differently. I walk over subway grates and heavy manhole covers every single day in the city, and I never, ever think about what is really down there in the dark.
We all just assume it's only dirty pipes and electrical wires.
Yeah.
We confidently assume we have mapped every inch of our world.
But we haven't.
Not even close. Just remember that regular guy in 1963, he thought he completely knew his own house. He thought he knew every inch of his own basement.
And he knocked down one single wall.
And found a lost, silent city waiting for 20,000 people.
That is exactly the thought I want to leave everyone with today. If a rogue chicken in 1963 could accidentally reveal a massive, multi-level metropolis that humanity had completely forgotten even existed.
What else is still down there?
Exactly. What is actually hidden behind the seemingly immovable rocks in our national parks? What is breathing behind the sealed concrete walls of those old, abandoned coal mines in Pennsylvania?
Are the indigenous legends of the ant people just campfire myths? Or are they literal cultural memories of a terrifying time when we all had to live in the dark just to see tomorrow?
And the biggest question of all, if we all went down there once, thousands of years ago, are some of us still there?
That is the question that keeps me up at night.
Keep looking down. You really never know what you might find.
Or what might find you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you in the next one.